This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. Good morning, I'm John Trout. It's Wednesday, October 16th, 2024. Here's what's coming up on America in the Morning.
Donald Trump talks business while Kamala Harris addresses concerns of Black Americans in two high-profile interviews. I'm John Stolnis.
The first day of early voting brings excitement to the polls in Georgia.
We need everyone to vote.
I'm Clayton Neville.
North Carolina's governor speaks out about misstatements as the state recovers from Helene. I'm Shelley Adler.
Hundreds of honorable discharges being handed out by the military. We'll tell you why.
On Wall Street, stocks are coming off a down day, but Apple shares hit a record high yesterday. I'm Jessica Ettinger.
The voters of two states will be deciding what to do about forced labor. We'll have details.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has signed a law aimed at preventing gas prices from spiking. I'm Rita Foley.
All ahead on America in the Morning. With 3 weeks to go until Election Day, former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris both sat down for Q&As with prominent news outlets and personalities. John Stolnis has the update from Washington.
Trump began his day talking economic policy with Bloomberg editor-in-chief John Micklethwait at the Economic Club of Chicago.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff.
Micklethwait challenged Trump on his claims that increasing tariffs on foreign nations would benefit American consumers.
America at the moment has $3 trillion worth of imports. You're going to add tariffs to every single one of them. That is going to push up the cost for all those people who want to buy foreign goods.
No, what's going to happen?
That is just simple mathematics, President Trump.
It's not. Yeah, it is, but not the way you figured. I was always very good at mathematics.
Trump was also asked about a claim made by journalist Bob Woodward in his new book, War, that Trump has spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin at least half a dozen times since leaving office.
Well, I don't comment on that, but I will tell you that if I did, it's a smart thing.
Trump once again refused to say if he would commit to a peaceful transfer of power next January should he lose the election.
Well, you had a peaceful transfer of power.
You had a peaceful transfer of power. You had a peaceful... Come on, President Trump. You had a peaceful transfer of power compared with Venezuela, but it was by far the worst transfer of power for a long time.
Thank you. I appreciate that, because this is what they like to do. This is what they like to do.
Meanwhile, Kamala Harris sat down with Charlemagne the God for a live audio town hall as she tries to firm up support among African-American voters.
Well, first of all, on the point of reparations, it has to be studied. There's no question about that. And I've been very clear about that position.
And she was challenged about the Biden administration's immigration policy.
But doesn't the Biden administration have to take some blame for the border, though? A lot of the blame? Because, the first 3 years, y'all did get a lot of things wrong with the border.
The first bill we passed before we did the Inflation Reduction Act, before we did the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, was a bill to fix the broken immigration system.
She also hammered Trump's claims that he would use the National Guard and military against so-called radical leftists if there is post-election unrest.
One mind that is about taking us forward and progress and investing in the American people, investing in their ambitions, dealing with their challenges. And the other, Donald Trump, is about taking us backward.
The other is about fascism. Why can't we just say it?
Yes, we can say that.
I'm John Stolnis.
It's been a busy 24 hours in Georgia with the opening of early voting, setting a state record for ballots cast, and two key court rulings regarding counties certifying election results and blocking a new rule regarding the hand counting of ballots. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports.
It was a record-setting day on the first day of early voting in Georgia. These voters were anxious to get to the polls and spoke with WSB-TV in Atlanta.
This is the most important election there's going to be in my lifetime.
I had to vote early. I'm really hoping, especially in Georgia, that there is a very heavy turnout. We need everyone to vote.
It's just a sense of security for me. It just feels good to know that I've got it out of the way. If you don't vote, you don't get to mope.
It was a busy start to early voting on day one.
At 10:29, we already had 71,054 people vote early. This is going to be a record breaker for the first day of early voting.
Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger says more than 234,000 votes cast.
Our motto has been very simple. Every vote matters because every voter matters.
Raffensperger says that everything his office has done has been
to improve the process, to build trust, and build your confidence in the election cycle.
Raffensperger was part of a high-profile phone call with former President Trump after Trump lost to Biden back in 2020. He was asked by Trump to find more than 11,000 votes. Alleged election fraud in Georgia has been an uphill battle for the Elections Department ever since. I'm Clayton Neville.
The court rulings by the same Fulton County judge says election officials cannot refuse and must certify election results by the deadline set in the state law, and ordered that the newly enacted rule regarding hand counting ballots is what the judge said was too much too late, with no rules regarding guidelines, training, or budgeting for extra personnel, and blocked its enforcement. FEMA in the hot seat over their response in North Carolina. That and more when America in the Morning continues after these messages. This is America in the Morning. Welcome back. AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy is in with details on a storm shaping up in the west.
A large and strong cold front will continue expanding into the northwest today. This feature will cause some rain and drizzle along the Washington and Oregon coasts, and we'll have showers through the rest of these states, southward to northern California, as well as eastward to Idaho and western Montana and into Nevada today. For some of these areas, it will be the first rainfall in nearly a month. Warmer weather will build out ahead of that front east of the northern Rockies from eastern Montana into eastern Wyoming, the western Dakotas, and western Nebraska. Some places like Billings, Montana may approach a record this afternoon. The rest of the plain states from Minnesota southward to Texas will have temperatures near or even below the historical average. Highs will be mostly in the 60s in the northern and central areas. And then in Texas, after record heat yesterday, we will have a nearly 30-degree drop in high temperatures today with readings in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That cold front will also produce a few showers across South Texas this afternoon, and this boundary will extend through the Gulf of Mexico with showers and thunderstorms across South Florida. A broad area of low pressure associated with that aforementioned cold front will continue to produce plenty of clouds as well as some showers in the eastern Great Lakes into the northeast, middle Atlantic, and southeast. Though the coverage should be less than previous days, this system will slowly exit eastward, and then weather should be improving for the rest of the week. This will also continue the chilly weather across most of the eastern states with afternoon temperatures about 10 to 20 degrees below average. That's the weather across America. It'll be a cool day in Boise, Idaho, with clouds and some rain at times with a high of 61. St. Louis, Missouri will have abundant sunshine today with a high of 62. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. The governor of North Carolina says misinformation is sowing chaos, and the head of FEMA claims threats made to its workers is slowing down the recovery efforts from Hurricane Helene. Correspondent Shelley Adler reports.
The ongoing spread of misinformation about operations is not okay. It has got to stop. The federal family has been here, working side by side with the state since day one.
After significant misinformation and threats to response workers in North Carolina, Governor Roy Cooper says,
if you're participating in spreading this stuff, stop it.
FEMA Under Administrator Deanne Criswell is dealing with lies about their response to Helene.
It's heartbreaking to see words or acts of hatred toward anyone, let alone federal responders who are here to help people in this critical time.
Former President Trump and his allies have seized on the storm's aftermath to spread false information about the Biden administration's response in the final weeks before the election.
Power outages are now a little under 13,000, down from 1 million. Many water systems and wells are now operational. However, challenges do remain in restoring water to Asheville and some other communities.
I'm Shelley Adler.
Hundreds of military personnel kicked out of the armed services under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy are now getting honorable discharges. Correspondent Lisa Dwyer has details.
The Pentagon says more than 800 military personnel have seen their service records upgraded to honorable discharges after previously being kicked out of the military under its former Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy. It's about 13,500 service members in total were affected. Many of those personnel either did not serve long enough to qualify for benefits, some already had their discharges upgraded through other means, or did not qualify for an upgrade due to other violations. The Pentagon now says that about 96% of the over 13,000 personnel affected by the policy now have received an honorable discharge. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
When we return, higher stock moves for Apple and Boeing. Plus, long-range outlook on the bull market when America in the Morning continues after these messages. This is America in the Morning. The Business Report is brought to you by Fisher Investments. Fisher Investments is a fiduciary, always putting clients' interests first. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Here's CNBC's Jessica Ettinger.
Wall Street opens this morning after a down day for the markets. The Dow and the S&P 500 index slipping from record highs. Chipmaker ASML's quarterly results got leaked. It warned of weaker China sales. And those shares fell, dragging other chip makers and the NASDAQ lower yesterday. Still, investors just wrapped up year 2 of a bull market on Friday. Can that continue, though?
Investors should not assume that we're going to see another 34% gain in the third year that we did in the second year, which, by the way, was the best of all second-year bull markets since World War II.
CFRA Research's Sam Stovall on CNBC. Apple shares hit a record high yesterday. Morgan Stanley was out with a positive note on iPhone 16 demand, which may be better than first thought. Holiday spending expected to be as much as 3.5% higher this year over last year. The National Retail Federation says the economy's healthy, the job market is strong. Big banks out with big quarterly results. Goldman Sachs, Citigroup, and Bank of America, all better than expected. Boeing shares were actually higher yesterday. The plane maker is making sure it's got cash on hand as it cuts jobs and endures a strike.
This credit line is for $10 billion, gives them quick access to cash, depending on how long this strike goes. 4 banks are behind the credit line: B of A, Citibank, Goldman, and JP Morgan. It's not a surprise. They need to have as much flexibility as possible as they deal with this machinist strike that shows no sign of ending anytime soon.
CNBC's Phil LeBeau. Universal opening the Epic Universe theme park in Orlando by next Memorial Day. Hospitals around the country are scrambling, many postponing non-emergency procedures because the North Carolina Baxter plant that makes 60% of IV fluid used in healthcare across the country was hit by Hurricane Helene.
First of all, you've seen a lot of industry players get out of this segment in recent years, but the ones who've remained in, what they've done is they've consolidated manufacturing in a small number of facilities. The only way to do this profitably. So now you have consolidated manufacturing for essential medicines in a small number of large manufacturing facilities. And when those go down, you take out a very large percentage of the market.
Former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb on CNBC. On today's watch list, earnings are coming from Abbott Labs, Morgan Stanley, Discover, U.S. Bancorp, and CSX Railroad. Disney is 101 years old today. The Powerball jackpot tonight, $408 million.
CNBC's Jessica Ettinger. When we return, banning prison labor in California and Nevada. When America in the Morning continues after these messages. This is America in the Morning. There will be a number of questions on ballots across the nation for the November election, and voters in California and Nevada will decide next month whether forced prison labor should be banned. Correspondent Donna Warder reports.
Both California and Nevada voters will decide whether to remove language from their state constitutions that Vice President Kamala Harris has called legalized constitutional slavery. It's not uncommon for prisoners to be paid less than $1 to fight fires, clean prison cells, make license plates, or do yard work at cemeteries. All prisoners in Nevada are required to work or be in vocational training for about 40 hours a week, unless they have a medical exemption. Some of them make as little as 35 cents an hour. Nevada's proposal would abolish from the state constitution slavery and involuntary servitude as punishment for crime. California changed its constitution in 1970 to remove an exemption for slavery, but the involuntary servitude exception is still on the books. I'm Donna Warder.
Also from the Golden State, correspondent Rita Foley reports California, with the highest gas prices in the nation, says it's trying to do something about it, but not everybody's happy.
He says the oil industry has been raking in unprecedented profits because it can. Filling up the tank costs more in California than anywhere else in the nation because of taxes and environmental regulations. The average price for regular unleaded in the state is $4.67 a gallon today, compared to the national average of $3.20, according to the AAA. Critics say this new law could unintentionally raise overall gas prices and threaten the safety of workers by giving the state more oversight over refinery maintenance schedules. Some argue that delaying necessary maintenance could lead to accidents. I'm Rita Foley.
Regular gas is cheapest in Georgia with a price of $2.71 a gallon. America in the Morning for Wednesday, October 16th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One. This is America in the Morning from Westwood One. I'm John Trout. Coming up this half hour.
The Pentagon and State Department have sent a letter to Israel. Sagar Magani, Washington.
Cracking down in the aftermath of two deadly storms. I'm Clayton Neville.
Florida areas continue flooding because of cresting rivers. Meanwhile, recovery work continues. I'm Julie Walker.
Mark Robinson, North Carolina's Republican candidate for governor, is suing CNN for $50 million. I'm Sue Aller.
The Supreme Court divided over a trucker's marijuana case.
The Small Business Administration has run out of money for its disaster assistance loans. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
The largest retail trade group in the country has released its holiday forecasts. I'm Shelley Adler.
We're back after these messages. Big drop in temperatures in the southern plains. This is America in the Morning. Here's AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
The Plains states will have the influence of high pressure from Minnesota southward to Texas. This is going to lead to plenty of sunshine for most areas. However, temperatures will be near or even below the historical average. Highs will be mostly in the 60s in the northern and central plains. And in Texas, after record heat yesterday, highs will be in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which is a nearly 30-degree drop from yesterday's highs. And that cold front that brought that cooler weather in is going to still produce some showers across South Texas this afternoon. And that does extend through the Gulf of Mexico into southern Florida, where we could see some showers and thunderstorms. Otherwise, we have a broad area of low pressure associated with that aforementioned cold front that will continue to produce clouds as well as some showers through the eastern Great Lakes, into the northeast, middle Atlantic, and even parts of the southeast, though coverage should be less than previous days as this system slowly exits eastward. This will also continue the chilly weather across most of the eastern states, with afternoon temperatures running about 10 to 20 degrees below the historical average. Highs in the northern states will only reach in the 40s and 50s. Farther south, the highs will only be in the 50s in parts of eastern Tennessee, northern North Carolina, and even northern Georgia, with 60s through the rest of Georgia and westward to Mississippi, and even into northern Florida. A strong cold front will continue expanding into the northwest today. This feature will cause some rain and drizzle along Washington and Oregon coasts, with showers through the rest of these states, southward through northern California, as well as eastward to Idaho and western Montana and Nevada today. The first rainfall in nearly a month for some locations, and then warm weather will be building out ahead of that, east of the northern Rockies from eastern Montana into eastern Wyoming and the western Dakotas and western Nebraska. That's the nation's weather. I'm AccuWeather.com meteorologist Matt Rindy.
Remember, you can follow us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and YouTube. Just search America in the Morning in your favorite listening app. I'm John Trout. The United States has laid its cards on the table where it comes to the ongoing battle in Gaza. Washington correspondent Sagar Meghani reports the message that's been sent to Israel comes with a stark warning about continued weapons support unless it gets more humanitarian aid into the war zone.
The Pentagon and State Department have sent a letter to Israel warning it could risk losing access to American weapons funding unless it allows more humanitarian aid into Gaza.
It is very much in keeping with our commitment to help Israel defend itself. It's commensurate with putting fighter jets in the air to knock out drones and missiles. It's commensurate with deploying guided missile destroyers that are ballistic missile defense capable in and around the waters off of Israel. The letter was not meant as a threat.
But rather, White House National Security spokesman John Kirby says it was meant to reiterate a sense of U.S. urgency
about the need for an increase, a dramatic increase in humanitarian assistance. Because there's been a decrease in humanitarian assistance, and it matters to us, is the why. When, why now? Because, again, tied to a recent decrease. But it's not like we haven't communicated these concerns in writing before to the Israelis. We have. And, we'll continue to stay on this very, very important topic.
The U.S. is giving Israel 30 days to, among other things, speed the aid flow, which had ramped up after a similar letter in April.
We hope that Israel makes the changes that the secretary outlined in the letter. We have seen Israel make changes before, and when they make changes, humanitarian assistance can increase.
State Department spokesman Matthew Miller says the flow has dropped sharply
by over 50% from where it was at its peak.
The letter comes amid growing U.S. frustration as Israel has defied repeated requests to scale back operations against Hamas.
Israel needs to do more to minimize civilian harm. Hamas needs to stop hiding behind human shields. Both of those things can be true. Both of those things are true. And ultimately, the horrific human toll over the past year is why we continue to push to get to a ceasefire, why we want to see both sides agree to a ceasefire.
Sagar Meghani, Washington.
Cleanup continues in the southeast from the impacts of Hurricane Helene. Correspondent Clayton Neville reports authorities in Tennessee and North Carolina are cracking down on lawbreakers and misinformation in the aftermath of the death and destruction.
Well over 200 people were killed in both hurricanes. The death toll potentially could still rise. Authorities still trying to track the missing in North Carolina. The impacts of the storm in that state still very raw. Emergency officials there say 4,600 people are staying in hotels and another 500 are being housed in shelters. State officials say that 170,000 North Carolinians have applied for FEMA help and 77,000 have been approved. In other fallout from the storm, the family of one of several employees of Impact Plastics in eastern Tennessee who died from flooding in Helene is suing the company, claiming it made employees work despite risks of the storm. In Florida, authorities are cracking down for things like looting in the wake of two deadly storms.
We said you'd be held accountable, and you will be held accountable.
Governor Ron DeSantis.
Daytona Beach, arresting people for looting. Sarasota, going in, a guy was breaking into an apartment complex. Port Richey, taking debris and dumping it in somebody else's private property.
The governor shared the story of an arrest connected to animal cruelty.
We were preparing for the storm. There was obviously a lot of moving parts. When this poor dog was left out there, we said that there would be justice for that, and we're going to nail you when we find out who did it. And that's exactly what they're doing here in Hillsborough County.
He called it totally unacceptable.
You don't just tie up a dog and have them out there for a storm.
Power and water services slowly coming back on, but not fully restored yet. That'll take time in hard-to-access areas. And North Carolina's Governor Roy Cooper urging misinformation surrounding a so-called failed FEMA response to the storm to taper off. Just this week, an armed man was arrested after making threats against FEMA workers. I'm Clayton Neville.
Gasoline and power still remain in very short supply in Florida, where powerful hurricanes Helene and Milton both made landfall. Insurers are warning that the destructive impact of Milton could be a double-digit billion-dollar loss. Correspondent Julie Walker reports Florida residents hard hit by Hurricane Milton are slowly getting back on their feet.
So they're still expecting 2 to 3 more days before we get it, which would be over a week without power. But overall, a lot of people was worse off than we are, so we're very fortunate on that.
Our home took on about 4 to 5 inches inside, about 1.5 feet outside.
In the wake of Hurricane Milton, some Florida areas continue flooding because of cresting rivers. Meanwhile, recovery work continues. Governor Ron DeSantis says the state's disaster fund has raised about $12 million and counting.
Through the disaster fund, we've been able to cut red tape and we've been able to get assistance to people who need it.
He also says power is back for most of the state.
We've now had over 4 million accounts restored to power since Hurricane Milton came. That is the fastest that's ever been done for that many accounts. If you're even without power for a few hours, it could be a real pain in the rear end, but we had over 50,000 linemen. These folks really got to work. So you got about 170,000 accounts right now that are without power.
And free gas is still available at 10 state depots.
We have now dispensed, just from the state, over 2.5 million gallons of gas free to the people of Florida.
I'm Julie Walker.
The latest on how businesses are faring in those hard-hit regions coming up next. And politicians' lawsuit against a giant media company. Those stories and more when America in the Morning continues after these messages. I'm John Trout. Welcome back. You're with America in the Morning. North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson filed a defamation lawsuit against CNN over a published report that alleged Robinson made racist and sexually explicit comments on a pornographic website. Sue Adler has that story.
Last month, CNN published an article about North Carolina Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. The Republican is currently running for governor against Democrat Josh Stern, who is currently leading in the polls.
This is a high-tech lynching on a candidate who has been targeted from day one by folks who disagree with me politically and want to see me destroyed.
According to the CNN story, Robinson called himself a black Nazi and said he supported reinstating slavery. The article goes on to say Robinson used anti-Semitic and racial slurs. Robinson is suing CNN and former porn store clerk Louis Love Money for $50 million, claiming defamation. At a press conference, his attorney Jesse Bennell says he's not surprised by CNN's article.
A left-wing media outlet is going to do everything they can to stop this man from being governor.
Robinson claims that artificial intelligence is involved in some context and that CNN published the story despite knowing that his data had been compromised. His lawsuit does not specifically mention AI involvement. Several top Republicans have withdrawn support since the article came out. I'm Sue Adler.
The Supreme Court sharply divided in the case of a former commercial truck driver who was fired after a failed drug test he said was caused by a CBD-rich elixir. The question before the court involved whether the driver, Douglas Horn, was permitted to file his lawsuit under the RICO Act, which allows plaintiffs to collect triple damages for business or property harms. Horn worked as a trucker for 14 years but suffered debilitating pain after a serious accident. He saw an ad for a new CBD-infused medicine called Dixie X that proclaimed to have no THC, the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. Horn had consumed the product in 2012 and failed his drug test weeks later. The hurricanes that plowed through the southeast has taken its toll on many businesses. Correspondent Lisa Dwyer reports that the Small Business Disaster Loan Program reports it is now out of money,
delaying much-needed relief for people applying for aid in the wake of the destruction caused by Hurricanes Helene and Milton. The SBA offers economic injury disaster loans to businesses and people affected by disasters. Congress can approve more funds, but Congress does not reconvene until November 12th. The SBA is pausing new loan offers until it gets more funding, but urges people to keep applying for the loans in the meantime. I'm Lisa Dwyer.
The state of Idaho's prison system is revamping procedures for its execution chamber following a failed lethal injection earlier this year. Correspondent Haya Panjwani reports.
Idaho will begin using central veins deep in the groin, neck, chest, or arm to execute prisoners by lethal injection if attempts to insert standard IV lines fail. Injecting a central venous line has long been a backup plan under the state's official execution policy, but it's never been used before because prison officials said the execution chamber was not designed in a way to protect the inmate's dignity during the process of inserting the line. In February, the attempted execution of Thomas Eugene Creech failed after the execution team was unable to put a peripheral IV line despite trying 8 times in several veins in his arms and legs. The failed execution attempt prompted the state to begin renovating its execution chamber to add a room where a doctor can insert a central venous line. I'm Haya Panjwani.
It may sound like an urban legend, but the true account of a Welsh man who accidentally threw away an old hard drive with 8,000 bitcoins on it has an update. Chuck Palm has that in today's Tech Report.
In an update to a classic lost Bitcoin story, a Welsh-based engineer has filed a lawsuit against Newport City Council for roughly 495 million British pounds, or $647 million, in damages for repeatedly denying his request to excavate a landfill site potentially containing his lost Bitcoin hard drive. The case dating back to 2013 when Howell unintentionally put the hard drive containing 8,000 bitcoins in the trash while he was cleaning his office. At today's near record price, 8,000 bitcoin would be worth about $536 million. Howell has gathered specialists to carry out the excavation at no cost to the city council and proposed to give the council 10% of the recovered coin value. Newport City Council believes he has a weak case and could negatively impact the environment. New Bitcoin exchange-traded funds are partially responsible for the rise today, with Bitcoin hovering around 68,000 and Ethereum at 2,600. For more crypto news, follow me on X at Chuck Palm.
In with Wednesday's sports, America in the Morning's Robert Workman.
American League Championship Series in New York last night. The Yankees doubled up the Guardians 6-3 for a 2-0 series lead. Aaron Judge homered and drove in 3.
The ghosts for pulling it out there to Monument Park, that's for sure. But no, just happy to add a couple more runs.
The best of 7 shifts to Cleveland for the next 3 games starting Thursday afternoon. The NLCS resumes tonight in New York. The Mets and the Dodgers tied at a game apiece. Hockey, the Wild whipped the Blues 4-1. Minnesota's last goal scored by goalie Philip Gustafson.
They try and make me get a whistle and get a face-off in our zone, and he just put it straight in the glove and try and put it down as quick as I could, and it just laid perfect there on the ice, and I just try and shoot it as hard as I could.
A rarity, but it does happen. This is the earliest it's ever occurred, and we've never seen goalies score twice in the same season. So maybe this is the year. Stars improved to 4-0 with a shootout win over the Sharks. Flames lit up the Blackhawks to win their 4th in a row to start the campaign. Capitals break into the win column, beating the previously undefeated Golden Knights. Alex Ovechkin with 2 assists. He becomes the 6th player to reach 700 goals and 700 assists. Hurricanes get their first W, beating the league-leading Devils. Oilers break through for their first win in overtime over the Flyers. Kraken score 4 in the 3rd to pound the Predators. Nashville in the NHL basement at 0-3. Panthers beat the Blue Jackets, and the Lightning struck the Canucks. NFL Week 7 begins tomorrow night in New Orleans with the Broncos at the Saints. The trade deadline is November 5th, but there was a flurry of activity yesterday. The Jets acquired receiver Devontae Adams from the Raiders for a 3rd-round draft pick that could improve to a 2nd-rounder. The deal reunites Adams and Aaron Rodgers, the former Packers teammates. The Bills got wideout Amari Cooper from the Browns for a 3rd-round pick and a swap of lower picks, and the Vikings added running back Cam Akers from the Texans for a swap of late-round picks. If that sounds a little familiar, Minnesota made the same kind of a deal last year to get Akers from the Rams. That's Wednesday Sports.
Robert Workman on sports. A prediction on holiday consumer spending when America in the Morning returns after these messages. You're with America in the Morning. We're at that time of year retailers hope people think about opening their wallets and buy for the holidays. Correspondent Shelley Adler reports on predictions for holiday spending.
The National Retail Federation says it expects consumers to spend more during the upcoming holiday season, but overall growth in sales will be slower than last year due to concerns over persistent inflation and prices. Matt Shea is the organization's CEO and president.
We know going into the holiday season that consumers continue to show resilience and they show strength in their spending.
While consumers have been fueling the economy, Shea says shoppers have high interest rates and lingering inflation on their minds. With Thanksgiving falling on November 28th, there also will be 6 fewer days between the holiday and Christmas Day compared to last year to go shopping. I'm Shelley Adler.
The Joker sequel has faced poor reviews and even worse ticket sales. As Kevin Carr explains, that means the movie will also cost the studio that made it a lot of money.
Things are just getting worse for the comic book misfire Joker Folie à Deux. This week started bad when it plunged 81% to make only $7 million in its second weekend.
I got the sneaking suspicion that we're not giving the people what they want.
That was the biggest drop for a comic book movie ever. The DC sequel ended up getting clobbered by Terrifier 3, another killer clown movie.
Who's this Santa? He's scaring my kid.
Yeah. He's scaring me, too.
Not too shabby for an unrated low-budget slasher that flexes about walkouts and viewers getting physically sick. A flop with critics at 33% on the tomato meter, as well as with audiences who gave it a D cinema score. Joker tumbled so far that it lost to Beetlejuice 2 in its 6th weekend.
The juice is loose.
Now Variety reports that Joker Folie à Deux is expected to lose between $125 and $200 million for the studio. For the $200 million budgeted movie, Heath Ledger's Joker might as well have just set that money on fire.
I'm only burning my half.
Warner Brothers has pushed back on these estimates, saying the film is yet to open in China as well as become available for home viewing, which hits on October 29th. However, big releases with such small VOD windows are generally reserved for flops, not hits. Just ask the Fall Guy.
I'm just a stunt guy.
I'm Kevin Carr.
America in the Morning for Wednesday, October 16th, 2024 is produced by Jeff McKay. Senior producer Kevin Delaney. I'm John Trout. This is Westwood One.